What is contemporary jewelry? Its definition seems to be such a complicated task that fanatics of the field still gather periodically to debate for hours in a row without still reaching a consensus. In here, I would like to point out that the term to define this discipline is also still on debate. Terms like art jewelry, studio jewelry, wearable art, research jewelry, or experimental jewelry, among others, have been used through the years and often vary from country to country. For the sake of this lecture, I will address that to contemporary jewelry. So we are not talking about mass-produced pieces, always happy, always shining and reproducing endlessly in the necks, wrists and fingers of half of the world. Neither about the limited editions of those exclusive brands with even more exclusive prices, or about the high-end adornments produced by fashion emporiums and promoted by luxuriant marketing campaigns. We are not even talking about those magnificent crafted pieces often transformed into cheaper versions aimed to satisfy the globetrotters of the modern world. We are talking here about jewelry that invites to a dialogue, that challenges our notions of what we understand about jewelry, that make us think about who its maker might be and wonder about his intentions, that invite us to observe how people relate to their ornaments. We are talking about jewelries who choose materials for their ability to communicate something else than monetary value, who find new ways to use traditional materials, and who search for different places where their jewels can dwell. We are talking about jewelers who are not afraid to experiment, and who do not really care if the result is of anybody's taste. Jewelers who have fun at their workshops and who amuses us with their ideas. Jewelers who make jewels that intrigue us, that amazes us, that repulses, that tells us a story or that intimidate us. Jewels that lead us to reflection or that cannot help but charm us. But we always talk about jewelry that speaks for its makers and that speaks by itself. Despite the lack of a unanimous consensus on its nomenclature and its understanding as a still undefined discipline, which extends beyond the respective categories of craft, fine art, design, body art, and even performance, contemporary jewelry is nowadays an exhaustive and fascinating field of its own. With its indisputable ability to provoke, critique, record, transmit, and generate meanings, qualities, and ideas, contemporary jewelry is able to engage individuals in a deep and personal way, and it has not been foreign to visual artists. Alexander Calder, Salvador Dalí, Lygia Clark, Mona Hatoum, Teresa Margoles, Miguel Luciano. In 50 years of research, experiment, and propose, contemporary jewelry often shares the role of art, reflecting a culturally diverse world and becoming a means of communication. Walking the Grey Area is a unique project able to reflect the communicative power of contemporary jewelry in various ways. The first one, and perhaps most important one, is the fact that it has put, by the first time in the history of contemporary jewelry, a group of visual artists and jewelry makers from Europe and Latin America in contact with each other. Walking the Grey Area is a collective, commissioned exhibition where 40 artists from utterly divergent cultural systems and an uncertain total numbers of involved countries have been invited to participate in a dialogue on global mobility, identity, and contemporary jewelry. Andrea Wagner, a German-Dutch jewelry artist and independent curator, and myself selected each 20 artists from our respective continents, Latin America and Europe. The artists were individually selected based on their artistic excellence, technical abilities, and creative response to various subjects. As a collective, the group was conformed based on the tension between their discourses and practices, their varied and experimental approach in the use of materials and techniques, and on the rich possibilities that lied on the exchange among them. There is, however, one thing that all the invited artists have in common. Like us curators, they are or have all been migrants, born in one place, living, working and studying in another one. The artists worked in couples and were paired randomly. The names of Latin American artists were written in a piece of paper, which was folded and placed into a bowl. The same was done with the names of European artists. We had fun taking turns to pick a name from a bowl and pairing it with a name from the other bowl. 20 couples were formed, and since last September they were carrying out a dialogue through the pages of a weblog specially created for this purpose. The artists were invited to conduct their dialogues in ways they found interesting or relevant, exchanging conversation, stories, images, and even materials. Besides their periodical postings in the blogs, the artists have exchanged letters and parcels through the post, organized Skype sessions, phoned, or even meet in person. Through this exchange, both artists and curators aim to find out how do artists and jewelry makers from both continents respond to changing definitions of mobility, locality, globalism, and migration. How do the changing conceptions of identities relate to their being and their practices? How do they reconcile their roots with their routes? What kind of exchange can take place between artists from areas of the world where contemporary jewelry is perceived and dealt with in such different ways? How can they relate to a diverse, moving, fast-changing audience? The processes and results of the blog have been as varied as the artists themselves and the way their own lives have developed in the past 6 months. Some of the collaboration has been rich and successful, some others not so much. Some questions have been answered to a more or lesser degree. Some new questions have been raised. But it has all resulted in an extraordinary collection of ornaments that undoubtedly talks about the will and desire to communicate, to learn from each other, and to make of contemporary jewelry a more culturally diverse scenario. And to our surprise, the idea of a group of jewelry artists developing their work from the concept to a finished piece through a visual media like the internet was a highly successful one, allowing us to reach a diverse, distant and growing audience. In 6 months, the Walking the Grey Area blog has built an audience of over 12,000 recurrent visitors from over 100 countries. I quote a fragment from Malika Kiva's email, a dental technician and ethnic art collector from Uzbekistan, who sent one of nearly 600 emails that we have received from the Walking the Grey Area audience. The blog has opened a whole new window for me. I never expected that jewelry, something I have been familiar with my whole life, could have the power to communicate in so intimate and intellectual manners, and such an intense way to touch me so deeply. It has been fascinating to witness the process from conception to birth. Please bring this exhibition to Uzbekistan. Walking the Grey Area has been successfully premiered at Galeria Emilia Cohen in Mexico City. The nearly 100 pieces that you will see on display today represent what contemporary jewelry means now and what it should mean in the future. A powerful tool to engage individuals into inner and interpersonal communication and a means for cultures to come closer. Its portability makes jewelry a rather democratic and universal language, where people and cultures can meet, acquaint, and create associations directly connected to specific cultural and personal settings and backgrounds. Within the years, my own long-time relationship with jewelry has slowly become a passion. I hope that Walking the Grey Area will turn this passion into a highly contagious virus and that it will be able to engage you as well.